Welcome to this exploration into one of the most unsettling cases ever documented in the annals of the Ozark Mountains. Before we dive in, share in the comments where you're tuning in from and the precise time you're listening to this account. We're eager to learn which corners of the world and what hours of day or night these chronicles managed to reach. The year was 1900, and the Holloway Hotel rose 3 stories high along the edge of Blackwater Creek in Newton County, Arkansas. The building loomed against the backdrop of thickly forested hills, a Victorian-style structure adorned with ornate woodwork along its eaves, towering windows, and a sweeping wraparound porch that treated visitors to views of the creek and far-off mountains. Built in 1882 by Thomas Holloway, a former railroad man hailing from Pennsylvania, the hotel earned its reputation as an honorable stopover for travelers navigating the increasingly thriving mining territory. With zinc discovered in the nearby hills and timber operations spreading through the Ozarks, Newton County welcomed a steady stream of entrepreneurs, land speculators, and laborers chasing fortune in what had once been a secluded and desolate land. The hotel occupied a strategic position roughly 3 miles from the county seat of Jasper, along what locals then called the Harrison Pike. This location offered both accessibility for travelers and the seclusion many affluent guests preferred. The surrounding growth of oak, hickory, and pine acted as a natural curtain shielding the inn from prying eyes, while the gentle murmuring of Blackwater Creek provided both soothing sound and a dependable water source. In spring and summer, wildflowers blanketed the path leading to the hotel. During autumn, the foliage blazed with hues of fire. In winter, bare branches etched against grey skies lent a solemn grace befitting a house that hosted indeed vigils of weighty business. County archives preserved in the Jasper Courthouse reveal the Holloway family bought the land from the Harrington estate after its value collapsed due to 3 unexplained fatalities on the property between 1876 and 1879. The first, landowner William Harrington, was declared dead of heart failure, though the coroner's report mentions the strange distortion of the man's features, hinting that his last moments were steeped in terror. The second fatality, Harrington's eldest son James, was written off as accidental after plunging into an old well on the grounds. The third, groundskeeper Elijah Peterson, remains listed as misadventure with scant notes beyond the statement that his body lay at the hill's base behind the main house, partly submerged in Blackwater Creek. According to the deed dated March 12, 1881, Thomas Holloway secured the 6-acre tract for nearly 1/3 of its earlier assessed worth. The contract bears a peculiar clause stipulating that certain subterranean aspects of the estate remain untouched per family custom. This line, however, was crossed through and initialed by both parties, indicating Holloway negotiated its erasure. Elizabeth Harrington fled to St. Louis immediately after the transfer and, as later inquiries reveal, refused all communication regarding the land until her death in 1897. Construction commenced in April 1881, and local papers tracked its progress with zeal. The Newton County Register, in its June 3, 1881 issue, proclaimed Mr. Holloway's hotel promises to become the most advanced lodging within 50 miles, boasting indoor plumbing, gas illumination, and every refinement for the selective traveler. The article also highlighted that Holloway employed 20 local hands for the job, assisted by specialized craftsmen imported from Springfield and St. Louis for intricate work. What the columns mentioned was that the hostelry stood atop an older frame, preserving only its stone foundation and what Holloway labeled in his permit as a functional well chamber. Based on 1883 tax rolls, the hotel held 36 rooms, a dining hall, and an abnormally vast basement that consumed nearly twice the building material of similar inns. One laborer from the original team, Samuel Davies, gave testimony to the County Historical Society in 1951, just before he passed. At 90, Davies reminisced, "Mr. Holloway was fussy about the cellar work. We locals stuck to upper floors and outer walls. He brought in 4 outsiders, never said where they hailed from, but their accents were northern to tackle what he termed specialized underground tasks. They claimed the basement needed heavy reinforcement because of creek flooding risk, but those men toiled mainly by night, and Holloway kept it bolted by day. One dawn, I came early and spotted them unloading iron pipes, not the usual kind for gas or water, but heavier with strange fittings. When they noticed me staring, one threw a canvas over the pipes. Holloway soon appeared and shipped me to the 3rd floor for the rest of that week. The hotel launched amid great excitement on January 15, 1882. Photographs preserved by the County Historical Society depict Thomas Holloway, a stout man with a meticulously styled moustache and thinning dark hair, standing proudly beside his wife Margaret on the front steps. Margaret Holloway, by accounts of the time, was a reserved, pale woman originally from Baltimore whose family tied into maritime interests along the eastern seaboard. They bore no children, a detail that sparked quiet conjecture among Newton County's gossipers. The inaugural fete attracted elite figures from across the county, as well as delegates from various mining and timber firms invested in the Ozarks. The Register branded it the grandest social function in recent memory, signaling Newton County's march toward refinement's rivaling those in established cities. Across its first 18 years, the Holloway Hotel upheld a name for cleanliness, civility, and ease. Revenue filings for tax purposes reveal a constant climb in profits through the 1880s, a brief slump during the 1893 panic, and a rebound thereafter. Thomas Holloway stood as a pillar among the business set, holding a town council seat from 1885 to 1889 and funding civic ventures like the 1887 schoolhouse and the 1890 courthouse restoration. These files betray no hint of financial strain or misconduct, though later probes uncovered that Holloway maintained an alternate ledger painting a far darker picture. Letters unearthed from the belongings of Joshua Williams, president of First National Bank of Jasper, hint that by late 1898 Holloway had drowned himself in rash mining gambles. One missive from Williams to his brother in Little Rock, dated November 22, 1898, remarks, "Thomas Holloway came to me yesterday seeking more credit for another Buffalo River scheme. I regret to say necessity forced me to refuse. His last 3 mineral pursuits yielded nothing and the directors won't sanction further risk. He took it poorly, mumbling something about other means as he left. I fear his financial standing may be far more fragile than people generally believe." A secondary ledger uncovered during the 1964 probe discloses that by January 1899, the hotel operated under severe deficit, with mortgage installments 3 months overdue and vendors threatening to halt credit. Entries within this ledger, penned in Holloway's unmistakable script, record increasingly frantic attempts to obtain extra financing, including appeals to investors as distant as St. Louis and Kansas City. A note dated February 1899 states simply, "All traditional routes exhausted, must weigh M's proposal regarding Baltimore ties, though the disgrace would be immense." The Earl. His documented anomalies surfaced in the Newton County Register on April 17, 1900, when a small announcement referenced the disappearance of Mary Carver, a 29-year-old seamstress from Springfield who had lodged at the hotel while finishing work for several well-known families in the vicinity. The blurb was minor, scarcely 3 lines squeezed between ads for patent remedies and a farm sale. Miss Mary Carver, lately of Springfield and temporarily boarding at the Holloway Hotel, has left the district without warning, leaving several obligations incomplete. Those with pending arrangements should contact Madame Ellsworth's dressmaking in Jasper for fulfillment of work. Her absence was not deemed suspicious. Women frequently relocated without advance word in those years, and the era's economic unpredictability made abrupt departures routine. What the notice neglected to report was that Mary Carver abandoned a half-made gown for the daughter of County Commissioner Harold Williams, along with her sewing kit, patterns, and belongings. These articles were found in her chamber, room number 31 on the eastern corridor of the 2nd floor, by a maid 2 days after she was last observed at dinner in the hotel dining room. The maid, later identified as Mary Ellis, informed Thomas Holloway, who assured her he would alert the law. No formal record was lodged until Commissioner Williams personally questioned the delay regarding his daughter's gown 10 days afterward. The commissioner's private journal, turned over to investigators in 1964 by his grandson, holds this line dated April 27, 1900, "Called upon Thomas Holloway today concerning the Carver woman's absence. Elizabeth's gown remains incomplete, and Mrs. Williams is deeply vexed. Holloway claims the woman departed abruptly, forsaking her effects, which he had already discarded as abandoned. When I remarked this conduct seemed unlike a professional seamstress's character, he grew irritable, asserting she voiced intentions to seek prospects in Kansas City. I find this recent, owning unsatisfactory but perceive little profit in pressing further over a matter of dressmaking, have engaged Madame Ellsworth to finish Elizabeth's gown, albeit at notable added expense. Williams made no further allusion to the matter, apparently viewing it as a trivial nuisance rather than grounds for alarm. This mindset mirrored prevailing social norms of the age, particularly concerning unmarried women without kin nearby. The vanishing of such persons rarely incited earnest inquiry, especially when a plausible account was given by someone of Holloway's stature within the town. Inside 3 months, the Register printed another brief item about a missing man, James Whitfield, 42, a traveling Bible salesman, last observed checking into the Holloway on June 29th. His horse and sample trunk lay unclaimed in the hotel stable for nearly 7 days before the stableman alerted Deputy Sheriff Lionel Hayes. The note, published July 8, 1900, said only that information is desired regarding the location of Mr. James Whitfield, agent of the American Bible Society, who may have ventured to Harrison or Father Points. Please direct queries to the sheriff's office. Local officers pursued what was termed a superficial review that achieved nothing. The hotel ledger confirmed Whitfield had been allocated room 27, though the bed appeared unused when inspected 2 days afterward. Hayes's preliminary memorandum preserved in county archives reads, Mr. Holloway avers the gentleman departed prior to dawn on June the 30th, leaving horse and goods to be fetched by an associate expected from Springfield. No such associate materialized. Telegrams to the American Bible Society's St. Louis branch verified Whitfield as their employee, yet offered no rationale for his desertion of property. The Society's envoys conveyed concern, deeming this behavior inconsistent with Whitfield's 12 years unfailing service. They requested the horse and materials be forwarded to their Springfield depot until settlement. The account concludes with Hayes noting, though conditions seem peculiar, no evidence of crime exists. The issue shall remain open, pending fresh intelligence. The horse and Bible stock were indeed dispatched to Springfield the next week, and the sanctioned investigation effectively ceased. Privately, however, Hayes began maintaining separate annotations on the affair, particularly after learning Whitfield had occupied a chamber in the same wing as Mary Carver. What bound these vanishings was not what turned up, but what did not. No baggage retrieved, no effects claimed by kin, no corpses, merely vacated rooms with beds scarcely ruffled. As per handwritten jottings of Deputy Sheriff Lionel Hayes archived in county files, Hayes, a systematic man who had served nearly 10 years, grew personally absorbed in the pattern unfolding at the Holloway Hotel. His remarks, formal and procedural at first, slowly betray mounting distrust. An entry from July the 20th, 1900 says, visited the Holloway Hotel again, outwardly to restore papers recovered in Whitfield's Bible trunk. Asked to view room 27 anew, alleging worry about possible evidence missed. Holloway balked, alleging the room was occupied, then conceded it was under repair for water harm. Saw fresh paint on the flooring by the bed. When asked about timing of these refurbishments, Holloway contended they had long been scheduled. No prior record of such plans in earlier reviews. Most curious. By September 1900, the pattern had become too stark to dismiss. 3 more lodgers had disappeared, a young wedded pair from Kansas City, Edward and Lillian Barrow, and a mining financier from Chicago named Samuel Crenshaw. All 3 signed the guest book. All 3 were allotted rooms on the eastern corridor of the 2nd floor. None of them were ever seen again. The Barrows arrived on August the 17th, intending to visit relatives in Horizon before heading to Texas, where Edward had landed work with a cattle ranch. They were placed in room 29. Crenshaw checked in on September the 2nd, reportedly to explore possible investments in regional zinc mining operations. He was assigned room 31, the same one Mary Carver had previously occupied. The hotel's proprietor, Thomas Holloway, insisted every guest had merely left ahead of schedule. He presented receipts proving payment for shortened stays. When asked about personal items, Holloway claimed nothing was left behind. Each missing guest had, by his account, packed carefully and departed during the early morning hours before the main desk opened. Many of our patrons favor an early start, he told Deputy Hayes in an official interview on September 7, 1900, particularly those facing long journeys. We accommodate these requests by providing cold breakfast baskets upon notice and unlocking the side entrance for departures before sunrise. Hayes's notes from October 3, 1900 reveal a shift in tone. Holloway's explanations grow less persuasive with each new case. There's something in his demeanor, a tension around the eyes when pressed, that suggests concealment over confusion. Today I questioned him about the Barrows specifically, pointing out their relatives in Harrison still await their arrival 2 months later. Holloway asserted they mentioned a change of plans, opting to visit Hot Springs before continuing to Harrison. When asked how a young couple of modest means could afford such a detour, he became visibly irritated, directing me to inquire at the stage office for confirmation of their departure. The stage office has no record of the Barrows as travelers. Hayes adds, most troubling is the pattern emerging in room allocations. Every vanished guest stayed in the eastern wing, specifically rooms 27, 29, or 31. When I requested to inspect those rooms today, Holloway said all three were occupied by a hunting party from Springfield. I observed the register listed only 2 entries for today, neither from Springfield. When I pointed out the discrepancy, Holloway claimed the third hunter had not yet arrived but would come on the evening stage. I stayed in town until the stage reached at 7:15 p.m. No passengers disembarked for the Holloway Hotel. The most compelling document from this time is a letter dated October 9, 1900, written by Mary Ellis, the chambermaid, to her sister in Joplin. The letter, uncovered during renovations of a Joplin home in 1963, contains this passage. I can't sleep well anymore. The noises from below are constant now. Mr. Holloway says it's only the pipes and the settling of the foundation, but pipes don't make noises like that. Pipes don't sound like scratching, and pipes certainly don't make sounds that almost, but not quite, resemble words. Mrs. Holloway appears nearly as unsettled as I am. I've seen her standing by the basement door listening, her face pale as laundered sheets. Last Tuesday, after everyone had gone to bed, I followed Mr. Holloway when he believed no one was looking. He carried a tray with food down to the old cellar, the one guests never see. He locked the door behind him and remained nearly an hour. When he returned, the tray was empty, but his sleeves were wet to the elbows. I gave notice the next morning. I'm leaving for Joplin on Saturday's stage. I can't stay here another week. The letter continues with details Ellis apparently withheld from her official statement to Hayes. There's something else, something I didn't tell the deputy when he asked about the missing guests. The night before Miss Carver vanished, I was turning down beds on the 2nd floor when I overheard Mr. Holloway in his office. The door was ajar, and I could see him at his desk handling something that looked like small levers or switches built into the underside of the desktop. He was muttering to himself about preparation and engaging a mechanism. When he noticed me, in the hall, he slammed the desk drawer and demanded why I was on that floor after hours. I explained my duties and he seemed to calm down, but insisted I finish and retire at once. The next morning, Miss Carver was gone, and room 31 had that strange smell, like damp metal and something sour I couldn't name. I've noticed the same odor after each disappearance, always in those 3 rooms in the eastern wing. Mary Ellis departed as planned on October 13, 1900. Her successor, a local named Sarah Jenkins, lasted only 17 days before also leaving without collecting her final week's pay. No written account of her experience has surfaced, but her grandson, interviewed in 1967 for the Historical Society's records, remembered that Grandma never spoke of her time at the Holloway, except to say some places aren't meant for decent people to linger. She refused to even walk on that side of the street for the rest of her life in Jasper. Once, when I was about 12, I asked her directly what had terrified her so badly. She looked at me for a long while, then said some things hunger in ways that can't be satisfied. Some appetites only grow with feeding. She would say no more, and became upset if pressed. The hotel continued operating through autumn of 1900, though local newspapers reported a sharp decline in occupancy. Town residents began steering clear of the establishment. A report filed by Hayes on November the 12th notes locals no longer take Sunday meals at the Holloway dining room despite it being the only proper restaurant within 15 miles. When asked, most give vague reasons about preferring home cooking, but several have quietly voiced concern about the rash of disappearances. Rumors spread about strange noises from the basement and a peculiar odor that sometimes lingers in the eastern wing. I have noticed this odor myself during 2 visits, a sour, organic scent unlike typical pea, lumbing or kitchen smells. Holloway dismisses such fears as rural superstition and blames any unusual odors on issues with the septic system, which he asserts is scheduled for repair. Hayes's private journal, kept apart from his official reports, reveals growing frustration over the absence of formal action. Judge Prescott refused my petition for a search warrant today, stating insufficient proof of criminal conduct. The judge and Holloway are known to socialize often at the Masonic Lodge, which may account for his reluctance. I have written the Federal Marshal's office in Fort Smith for guidance, as I believe something unnatural happens at the Holloway Hotel. 5 individuals, possibly more, that remain unreported have vanished without trace across 6 months, all from the same property. This cannot be chance, yet I find myself unable to advance through official channels. What turned the matter from troubling to horrific was winter's arrival. On December the 7th, 1900, a brutal ice storm hit the Ozarks, toppling power lines and isolating rural communities for days. Trees weighted with ice collapsed across roads, making travel impossible. Temperatures plunged to record lows, with weather logs from that time showing overnight readings of 15 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. The Holloway Hotel, with its generator, became refuge for stranded travelers. County records indicate 17 people checked in during the storm, including a family of 4 from Eureka Springs, 3 salesmen from St. Dome, Blue Eye, a retired schoolteacher from Fagotville, 2 sisters heading to visit kin in Harrison, and several others whose names appear only as initials in the register. Weather documents show temperatures stayed below freezing for 11 straight days. The Eureka Springs Gazette later printed an inquiry about the Thornton family, Edward and Martha, with children Samuel 9 and Emma 7, who had departed for Harrison on December 5th and were expected to arrive for Christmas with Martha's parents. The notice, dated December 28, 1900, reads, "Information sought regarding the whereabouts of the Edward Thornton family who departed Eureka Springs on December 5th en route to Harrison. The family would have been traveling by private carriage and may have sought shelter during the recent severe weather. Any person with knowledge of their movements is requested to contact the Gazette office or Sheriff Thomas in Harrison." No reply to this appeal was ever printed. When roads finally cleared on December the 19th, only Thomas Holloway and his wife, Margaret, remained inside the hotel. According to their sworn statement, all guests had left as soon as travel became possible. No resident in town reported observing travelers depart. The stagecoach service held no record of extra passengers. The nearest railway reported no unusual spike in ticket sales. When Deputy Hayes inquired regarding the family from Eureka Springs, the Thorntons, composed of parents and 2 children aged 7 and 9, Holloway produced a ledger entry stating they had stayed only 3 nights instead of the storm's 11 days. Hayes noted in his journal, later recovered from his effects, that no family, particularly with young children, could have departed into weather still near 0 degrees with roads largely impassable. The explanation defies both reason and human capability. Hayes's entry, dated December 21st, reveals mounting concern. "I visited the hotel again today under the guise of inquiring about mail delayed by the storm. The atmosphere has altered perceptibly. Margaret Holloway, always reserved, now seems openly terrified. Her hands shook while serving tea, and she flinched violently at a noise from the basement. A dull thud, then what sounded like scraping. Thomas explained it as ice sliding from the roof onto cellar doors, though the temperature had not climbed above freezing in days. Most disturbing was their response when I asked about the Thornton children, specifically whether they appeared well when leaving. Margaret dropped her teacup, shattering it on the floor, while Thomas's face darkened crimson. He insisted every guest left in good condition, then abruptly ended our talk, citing urgent matters in the kitchen. The entry continues. Before departing, I managed to speak briefly with the cook, Mrs. Abernathy, who has served at the hotel since its opening. She looked uneasy and avoided meeting my eyes, but when I mentioned the odd noises, she murmured, "It's hungry now, worse than before." When I asked what she meant, she glanced toward the kitchen door to ensure privacy, then said, "The well beneath. It's always been there, but he's fed it too much. It wants more now. Always more." She refused further comment and hurried off as Thomas re-entered the room. Deputy Hayes, increasingly wary, tried to secure a warrant to examine the premises thoroughly. His request, preserved in county archives, contains this line: "I believe there is adequate cause to perform a detailed inspection of all rooms, storage spaces, and especially the basement facilities of the Holloway Hotel. The sequence of vanishings tied to stays at this location cannot be written off as coincidence. Of particular concern is the apparent impossibility of 17 people leaving unnoticed during or just after the recent storm. I formally request authorization to investigate all parts of the property, focusing on areas not usually accessible to patrons or the general public." The warrant was denied by Judge William Prescott, whose records later revealed he had received a substantial loan from Thomas Holloway 3 months prior to settle gambling debts incurred during a private card game in Fort Smith. A note in the judge's ledger, uncovered in a later unrelated inquiry into judicial corruption, logs a payment of $750 from Holloway on September 12, 1900, with the remark "private ARR, arrangement terms as discussed." Hayes was reassigned the following week to another district, sent to the remote western edge of the county, where his duties mostly involved resolving quarrels among isolated homesteaders. His personal journal shows dismay. The transfer comes as no shock, though its speed suggests powerful meddling. Prescott's role is obvious to anyone with eyes. "I have written the county prosecutor directly, bypassing local channels, though expect little outcome. Something unnatural dwells at the Holloway, and those in power to investigate have become either blind or complicit." The prosecutor, Andrew Morton, did respond to Hayes's letter, though not as hoped. A terse note dated January 7, 1901, urges Hayes to focus on your new duties and leave the Holloway issue to those positioned to address it properly. Continued unofficial probing exceeds your authority and may bring more permanent reassignment. The matter is closed. Morton's personal ties to Judge Prescott were well known. They had been law partners before Prescott's elevation to the bench and kept both social and financial ties. The hotel kept running through winter and into spring of 1901, though business slowed dramatically. Locals completely avoided the place, and travelers passing through more often chose plain boarding houses or campsites over the once grand hotel. Thomas Holloway was frequently seen heading to Eureka Springs and Harrison, reportedly trying to secure money for renovations and expansion. Bank ledgers from that time show those attempts all failed. One note in Harrison National Bank's ledger, dated March 27, 1901, reads simply, "Loan application from T. Holloway, Jasper, denied." Earlier questions from Newton County officials had already raised doubts about the hotel's future. Around this time, Margaret Holloway's health seemed to decline severely. Dr. Samuel Wilson, the county doctor, logged 3 visits to the hotel between January and March of 1901 to treat Mrs. Holloway for what he called nervous exhaustion and strange auditory disturbances. His medical notes, later shared with investigators, mention her claims of constant noises under the floorboards and voices whispering her name from the walls. Dr. Wilson prescribed laudanum and advised she stay with relatives until better, a suggestion Thomas Holloway reportedly brushed off as both needless and impractical. One particularly telling document from this period is a letter Margaret wrote to her sister in Baltimore on February 17, 1901, but apparently never mailed. It was found later inside a drawer of her writing desk when the hotel's contents were inventoried after the fire. In it, she writes, "I can't endure this any longer, Elizabeth. The things Thomas has done for financial salvation have cursed us both. The noises never stop now. Scratching, whispering, sometimes what sounds like crying children. He says it's all in my mind, but I've seen his face when the sounds grow louder. He knows. He still feeds it, though he swore after December he would stop. Last week, a mineral surveyor came by and Thomas sent him to room 27. I pretended sickness and stayed in our quarters with the door locked. But the sounds that night, I can't describe them. The surveyor was gone by morning, his horse still in the stable. Thomas sold it 3 days later to a trader from Harrison. I've started taking double the laudanum Dr. Wilson gave me. It's the only way I can sleep, though even then my dreams are full of scratching sounds and voices calling from deep, wet places. Then on April 3rd, 1901, fire broke out in the eastern wing. According to Newton County Register's report, printed April 5th, the blaze was first spotted just after midnight by a passing freight wagon driver who noticed flames in the second-floor windows. By the time volunteers arrived, most of the second floor was gone. The paper notes Mr. and Mrs. Holloway Esker, paired unharmed, woken by smoke. No guests were present, a fortunate detail that avoided greater tragedy. The cause was officially listed as likely electrical fault, though the hotel's remote position on the grid made close investigation hard. What the article didn't include, but later inquiries revealed, was that the fire began specifically in rooms 27, 29, and 31, the same rooms tied to all earlier disappearances. The volunteer fire chief's report, filed with the county but never printed, records this strange detail. Damage indicates the fire started simultaneously in 3 separate spots in the eastern wing's second floor. That pattern doesn't match an electrical fire, which usually starts at one origin. Clues suggest an accelerant may have been used, though damage was too heavy to confirm. Insurance files from Continental Assurance, uncovered during a company archive project in 1967, showed Thomas Holloway boosted his policy coverage by 300% only 6 weeks before the blaze. The claim was first denied on suspicion of arson, but later paid at 60% after Judge Prescott intervened personally with the company's regional director. His letter, still in Continental's records, praises Holloway's reputation and contributions to local growth as reasons to settle the claim favorably, despite timing issues. Instead of rebuilding, Holloway sold the ruined property to a distant cousin, Elias Holloway, who had recently come from Baltimore. The sale, recorded May 17, 1901, transferred the property for a token price with odd conditions, including one stating the existing foundation and basement stay untouched and no digging exceeds 6 feet without the seller's written consent. Thomas and Margaret moved to Denver, where they bought a much larger hotel downtown using the insurance money. No charges were ever brought against them for either the disappearances or the fire. A telegram sent by Thomas to Elias on June 2, 1901, kept among Elias's belongings and found during the 1964 inquiry, bears a cryptic warning. Basement remains sealed as agreed. Do not attempt access under any circumstance. Previous unfortunate events came from exploring below ground. Stay away from the eastern foundation. Ignore local superstition, but take practical care with original structure. The story might have ended there. Another frontier mystery unsolved but faded as the 20th century brought new problems to the Ozarks. But in 1937, at the height of the Depression, Elias Holloway's son Frederick decided to renovate what was left of the building to create low-cost housing for men working in the new Civilian Conservation Corps camps nearby. The old hotel had been partly rebuilt after the 1901 fire, but only the western wing and central section were restored. The eastern wing, where all the vanishings had taken place, remained a burned-out shell considered too costly to rebuild in the lean years of the early 1900s. Frederick Holloway, who'd grown up under his father's strict orders never to disturb the basement or foundation, had mostly obeyed this rule for decades. But the growing need for worker housing and the promise of money outweighed family warnings. In May, in 1937, Frederick Holloway hired a construction crew from Springfield to clear out debris from the eastern wing and prepare the site for fresh building work. While clearing rubble from the collapsed section, workers stumbled on something that made brief headlines in the Newton County Gazette on June 17, 1937. Renovation work at the old Holloway property uncovered a strange architectural feature, a secondary well shaft. Roughly 4 feet across, it was found right next to the original water well in the foundation. Because of safety risks, county officials ordered the area reinforced and permanently sealed. The article included additional details that weren't widely circulated at the time. Crews mentioned oddly Conditions around the shaft, like a foul stench described as similar to a summer slaughterhouse, and metal surfaces showing severe corrosion, unlike normal water damage. Most puzzling was the presence of what looked like mechanical parts built into the shaft walls, including metal rails and a partly rotted pulley system. The secondary shaft appeared to have been sealed with concrete at some point, but the barrier had cracked, revealing a deep drop workers estimated went at least 60 feet below ground. Foreman Henry Russell guessed these pieces could have belonged to an early elevator system, though why they'd exist inside a well shaft made no sense. The article might have faded into obscurity, if not for a letter printed 3 days later from Oliver Hayes, the former deputy's son. His message, strikingly calm for such a revelation, simply stated that his father had long suspected something hidden beneath the Holloway Hotel's foundation and suggested a proper investigation before sealing the well for good. He wrote, "My father maintained until his passing in 1934 that the disappearances tied to the hotel in 1900 were never truly explained. I believe evidence might still exist in parts of the foundation no one normally sees. While I have no first-hand knowledge, sealing away what could be the last proof without careful review would dishonor those who vanished." Hayes's letter drew a short reply from the current sheriff, William Garrett, who visited the location on June 22, 1937. His report, filed in county records but never printed, dismissed the concerns entirely. Inspected excavation at Holloway property. Secondary shaft appears only to be an abandoned well likely predating hotel construction. Mechanical parts referenced in the paper match standard water drawing equipment of that era. No indication of anything suspicious or related to the disappearances nearly 40 years ago. Recommend sealing for safety as planned. No further inquiry happened. With the Depression squeezing budgets, county leaders prioritized safety over historical mysteries. The shaft was filled with concrete, and the renovation pushed ahead. By September 1937, Frederick Holloway opened a boarding house on the property. It ran without trouble until 1943, when wartime rationing made it unprofitable. The building became storage for surplus gear tied to nearby military training operations. What official documents never recorded but came out later in 1960s interviews were the workers' experiences sealing that shaft. Robert Johnson, who handled the concrete mixer, told investigators, "That hole wasn't right. When we broke the seal, air rushed from below, not blowing out like pressure release, but sucking inward like the shaft was breathing in, and the sound, not like wind. I can't describe it except it sounded hungry. We poured almost double the calculated amount of concrete before it filled. The engineer couldn't explain it, said maybe hidden side chambers. But the strange part was at the end. I swear I heard something moving under all that wet concrete, something big shifting down there. The foreman said it was settling, but I've done this my whole life. Concrete doesn't settle like that. It doesn't make noises like that." Over the following decades, the property changed hands multiple times, used as a hardware store, a church hall, and finally, by the late 1950s, left abandoned and rotting. Local kids made up daring games about staying overnight in the haunted halls, though no official record mentions paranormal activity then. A batch of interviews by the Ozark Folklore Society in 1959 with longtime locals only produced vague talk about bad feelings and unhealthy air at the site. One story from retired teacher Eleanor Mitchell stood out. "I taught at the county school from 1938 to 1956, and I remember children whose families lived in that boarding house in the late 30s. They'd show up exhausted, saying they couldn't sleep because of noises in the walls. One child, a smart girl named Susan Collins, brought me an art project that disturbed me so much I kept it. It showed the building with faces pushing out from the foundation stones. When I asked her about it, she said, 'That's where the hungry people live. They scrape at night looking for food.' Her family moved to Springfield the next month." In 1962, the Ozark Historical Society bought the property to restore it as part of a plan to preserve key regional landmarks. Working under a state historical grant, they hired architectural historian Raymond Chandler to study the structure's condition and significance. While assessing, Chandler saw irregularities in the foundation blueprints. The original plans filed in 1882 showed one well in the northwest corner, yet the real structure contained 3 shafts. The first well, the secondary shaft uncovered in 1937, and a third never documented under the old hotel kitchen. Chandler's field notes, still kept in the archives, express his astonishment. The tertiary shaft differs completely from standard well design of that period. The opening is narrow, barely wide enough for a man, and slants downward instead of vertical. Most unusual, its interior seems lined with metal, not stone. The metal is heavily corroded with strange pitting patterns, suggesting long-term exposure to highly acidic conditions. This does not align with any 1880s well technology or any other underground construction I've seen in 23 years studying Ozark architecture. The layout of these 3 shafts forms a triangle with nearly equal spacing, clearly an intentional design, not random additions as water demand grew. Most intriguing is the find of slim grooves carved into the foundation stones, stretching out from each shaft toward precise spots in the original layout. These grooves, about 3 inches wide and deep, seem intended for pipes or similar conduits, though no such fixtures remain intact for review. The network of channels extending from the eastern shaft lines up perfectly with the positions of rooms 27, 29, and 31 on the second floor, the same rooms linked in old reports to the hotel's vanishings. Chandler also observed inconsistencies in certain room sizes compared to the early plans. His measurements revealed that several second-floor rooms in the eastern section, specifically rooms 27, 29, and 31, those tied to the disappearances, had floors roughly 8 inches thinner than standard architecture would require, with no matching variance in ceiling height beneath. The anomaly, he wrote, hints at alterations to the initial design during construction. Why only these rooms were thinned remains unknown, though it sparks worries over structural strength. The Historical Society, strapped for funds, chose to delay deeper investigation of the shafts until the main building was stabilized. That work dragged through 1963, slowed by money shortages and structural problems. Local helpers supplied most of the labor, working weekends under Chandler's oversight to brace sagging joists and swap out decayed support beams. In April 1964, a major find changed the entire course of the project. While tearing out ruined flooring in what had served as the hotel's private dining hall, workers uncovered a small metal case holding a leather-bound journal. The box, fashioned from copper with a basic clasp, had been hidden beneath a patch of subfloor that showed signs of being removed and replaced sometime before. The journal, water-stained yet partly readable, belonged to Thomas Holloway. As logged by the Society, it spanned January 1899 to March 1901. Many pages were ripped out and others ruined beyond use. What survived, however, revealed a grim tale of money woes, strange discoveries, and finally horrific deeds done to protect the Holloway family's fortune. Entries from February 1899 detail Holloway's mounting financial troubles. The investments in mining have brought only crushing debt. 3 years of labor and ruin looms over us. The Simmons tract turned out worthless despite the assayer's claims, and the Matthews claim flooded past saving last month. The bank has already called in 2 notes, with a third likely by summer. M speaks of fleeing to her family in Baltimore, but I cannot bear such disgrace. Yesterday I begged Williams at the bank one last time, but he was unmoved by our years of dealings. Business is business, he said, as though that phrase forgives every cruelty. We may have 3 months before foreclosure is certain. A later entry, dated March 17, 1899, marks a shift. The Harrington woman's warning now rings true. I've spent the past week exploring the original foundation vaults, places I had avoided due to her odd insistence they stay untouched. Behind the old stone wall in the northeast cellar, I found a passage opening into a chamber like nothing I've seen. Its size defies the foundation's above-ground limits. It seems bigger inside than physics allows, but what waits in the center has changed everything. I dare not fully write it here, even in private. Let it suffice to say, it is not a well in any usual sense, though it holds something that moves like liquid. M refuses to look, saying its stench alone proves her family's tales about the Harrington land. She claims her grandmother spoke of a place in the Ozarks where something hungry dwells beneath the soil. I called it superstition, until now. By June 1899, Holloway's tone had shifted. The thing under the kitchen has altered everything. I cannot set down the entire truth, but let it suffice that the earlier owner's fear of the lower rooms came from cowardice, not safety. What flows there may be our redemption. The liquid holds qualities unknown in science. Its texture and reactions defy all chemistry, most notably its APE. Petite knows no end. First trials with small creatures show it devours life completely, leaving nothing in ours. The practical uses seem vast, though M grows, ever more distressed by my work. She will not go downstairs now, claiming she hears noises even when I run no tests. The journal next details sweeping changes in the basement. All happened at night after staff had gone. Holloway hired 2 outsiders to alter the shaft and install the collection rig. Both were paid in cash and dismissed at once. A note from August 28, 1899 states, "The eastern wing changes are finished. The system runs smooth in tests. Remote control from my office works silently, though it needs heavy weight to trigger fully. This will not hinder its planned use. M caught me testing the levers yesterday and broke down, threatening to reveal all. I warned her such talk would doom us completely. She has locked herself in her room with her laudanum. I have doubled her regular dose to ensure her calm, at least for now." Another entry dated September 5, 1899 gives technical notes. The secondary shaft now links to the main chamber by channels carved in bedrock. The limestone cut easier than I'd guessed, almost as if it wished to yield. Most astounding is how the substance acted once the channels opened. It rose against gravity, spreading over fresh surfaces as though curious about its new reach. The men never saw this, for I had sent them off before the last ties were made. Some truths should not be seen by chance. The flow has now steadied, forming a pool in each. Of the 3 shafts, linked yet separate, each reservoir shows slightly different traits, though all share the same defining feature: consumption. The most unsettling entry, dated September 10, 1899, states, "The system is complete. The 3 entry points have been disguised as water wells, though only the northwest shaft still provides actual water. The eastern shaft now connects straight to rooms 27, 29, and 31, just as the kitchen shaft links to the private dining hall. When the floor triggers, engage, everything above simply vanishes beneath. M is horrified by what I've done, yet cannot deny the financial need. The first trial using livestock succeeded. The well accepts everything. The noises afterward were unexpected, but ended within hours. The substance appears to break down not only flesh and bone, but every organic material, wood, leather, fabric. Only metal remains, and even that shows corrosion after long contact. I have created a device for salvaging valuables before they're ruined. Our financial rescue is guaranteed, provided we choose subjects wisely." The journal then notes a series of offerings to the well starting in April 1900. Each record lists a room number, the estimated weight of the guest, and how long the process took. Names are never written, only initials. The first, dated April 12, 1900, reads, "MC, room 31, about 130 peltomtunes. Processing done within 6 hours. No side effects. The well's contentment evident in stillness afterward. Financial gain recovered, belongings worth roughly 37 plus paid room fee. No inquiries expected. Subject lacked local ties. Mechanism worked perfectly. Activation from office occurred without any sound alerting nearby rooms. IBMO took extra laudanum and swears no knowledge of events." Later entries mirror this style, with increasingly clinical tone, what looks like a systematic pattern of killings for money. A June 30, 1900 entry mentions JW's room 27, roughly 180 peltomtunes. Process required 9 hours, longer than forecast. Noise under the floor afterward forced an excuse to guests about settling wood. Benefit, horse and sample case sold in Harrison for $41, plus recovered cash of $17. Subject's employer may ask questions eventually, but linking it here will be nearly impossible. Am growing anxious despite more laudanum. Claims of hearing scraping below even when I hear nothing. An August note describes the disposal of the bar. Rero pair, EB and LB, room 29, combined weight about 310 pounds, largest offering so far. Processing lasted 14 hours, producing strange results, levels in all 3. Shafts climbed clearly, and glow appeared for 20 minutes after complete dissolution. Most disturbing was the sound, clear voices echoing from the primary chamber nearly an hour post-process. Em heard them plainly, though 2 floors up, and dosed on laudanum. She broke down, needing restraint and extra sedation. I may have to consult Dr. Wilson about a permanent fix for her worsening state. The most chilling entries come from December 1900 during the ice storm. One, dated December 11th, says only, "Today was most fruitful. Rooms 27, 29, 31, 14, 16, and 22 all engaged. Total estimated weight 1,040 paltidorms. The well feeds, processing through night. Sound far louder than before, but storm masks it well. M took laudanum and retired early. Profit massive. The children were unforeseen, yet essential given the need. The T family especially rewarding. Jewelry, watch, and cash nearly $200. This clears all debts with enough left to move if needed." Another entry, December 18th, shifts tone. "Something is different. The well's nature after December 11th has been alarming. Its level has risen across all shafts, nearing basement floors in places. Glow now steady instead of brief. Worst are the sounds, not mere scraping or lone cries, but almost structured speech. M swears she hears words, even her own name. I call that absurd. Still, I've raised her laudanum again, though Wilson fears addiction. Worse, the liquid itself is changing, thicker now, almost fabric-like. In the main chamber forms appear, shapes that resemble anatomy, configurations hinting at partial reconstruction of what it devours. This never happened before. It signals a deep shift in its essence." The last legible entry, March 18, 1901, reads, "M can no longer endure it. The noises below have altered. She insists she heard speech last night, not scraping. I told her nothing survives the well's grip. Nothing returns from the certain at depth. Yet even I sense the sounds have changed. Maybe we grew too bold. Maybe the well has limits we crossed. We'll cease everything and leave as soon as we can arrange it. Denver promises freedom, without the curse beneath us here. M demands we burn the eastern wing before leaving. She says it must be purified with fire to stop what she calls the continuation of the cycle. I've agreed to this request since the insurance now offers enough coverage to settle us comfortably elsewhere. Everything is set. 3 days from now we'll be free of this place and its ravenous darkness." The Ozark Historical Society quickly contacted state officials after finding the journal. A preliminary inquiry started on April 30th, 1964, led by State Police Detective Warren Mitchell. His first report states, "The journal seems authentic based on paper and ink analysis. If real, it indicates Thomas Holloway may have been involved in numerous murders at the hotel between 1899 and 1901. Still, its references to the well and its embrace remain vague. The technical notes suggest some kind of mechanical device was built to send victims down to a lower section, but how the processing worked remains uncertain." Mitchell continues, "Initial digging near the foundation shows evidence matching Holloway's described alterations. Structural review confirms odd floor construction in rooms 27, 29, and 31, featuring hinged panels and hidden trigger mechanisms accessible from a secret passage next to what was the hotel owner's office. These devices were made to collapse floors in chosen rooms, forming a chute that dropped contents toward the eastern shaft. Similar devices, though cruder, connected the private dining room to the kitchen shaft. The engineering feat is impressive for its time, hinting Holloway had technical skill beyond what his past suggests." On May 7, 1964, excavation began at the third shaft. Under the former kitchen, workers cut the concrete seal and uncovered a metal-lined shaft about 30 feet deep, ending in a chamber roughly 15 feet wide. The chamber held no human remains, but the walls showed strange stains and erosion marks. Mitchell's report describes a residue unlike standard mineral deposits in wells. The material seems organic, with a feel similar to partially dissolved animal tissue. Lower walls showed heavy metal corrosion, with holes exposing bare rock. Most shocking was Mitchell's note on formations in the chamber that defy normal explanation. His report, with photographs now locked in state archives, says, The floor has raised shapes made of material like calcified tissue. These shapes display organized patterns pointing to deliberate design instead of random buildup. Some formations clearly resemble human features, finger-like extensions, curved surfaces akin to skull shapes, and one case showing a partial facial form with indentations like eye sockets and a nasal cavity. Experts in geology called in on these structures could not explain their origin naturally. Forensic tests completed May 21, 1964, confirmed traces of human hemoglobin in samples from the chamber walls. The report also noted an unknown organic substance that had partly degraded the metal lining. This substance showed traits like extremely strong digestive enzymes, far stronger than anything normally found in nature. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the biochemist who ran the analysis, wrote, "The compound bears a surface-level resemblance to digestive fluids in certain carnivorous plants, but at a scale and potency that surpasses all known biology by several magnitudes. The material stays active even after decades exposed to air and moisture, proving incredible stability. In lab tests, it fully dissolved organic matter, including bone and hair, within hours." Her report adds a chilling detail. Most unusual is how the material behaves when mixed with organic samples in the lab. Instead of merely breaking down the tissue, the substance seems to briefly absorb structural components before destruction. Under a microscope, it shows a phase where digested material is arranged into recognizable cellular frameworks before final breakdown. This organizing trait has no known comparison and hints at abilities beyond mere digestion. As digging went on into June, crews found a network of pipes linking all three shafts. The system seemed built to move liquid from the third chamber to the others. The worst discovery was the machinery under rooms 27, 29, and 31, a setup of trapdoors worked by levers hidden in a passage behind the hotel owner's office. Those floors had hinged panels that, when triggered, tilted 45 degrees, sliding anything, beds and guests alike, straight into the waiting shaft. Mitchell's search also exposed a secret room next to the kitchen, reachable only through a hidden pantry door. Shelves inside still held various belongings: jewelry, watches, wallets, matching items from people who vanished at the hotel. A leather-bound ledger in that room carried precise records of recovered valuables and their later sale, with dates matching known disappearances. Detective Mitchell's last report, filed August 12, 1964, concluded, "Evidence shows Thomas Holloway altered the hotel to kill chosen guests, mainly those unlikely to be missed, traveling salesmen, single women, and passing couples with no local ties. Victims were dropped through trap doors into a shaft leading to a chamber beneath the structure. What occurred in that chamber remains uncertain, but chemical studies indicate the presence of a highly corrosive substance likely used to destroy remains. Conservative estimates from hotel logs suggest as many as 27 victims between April 1900 and December 1900. The report pushed efforts to trace Thomas and Margaret Holloway, but early research showed both had died in Denver, Thomas in 1917 from liver failure, Margaret in 1910 from what was recorded as nervous exhaustion. Hospital archives from St. Mary's Sanitarium in Denver say Margaret was admitted June 1908 after what was described as a mental collapse, with auditory hallucinations and violent agitation. Notes from her doctor stored in the sanitarium's files detail her constant claims of hearing voices through the floors and her belief something had followed them from their old home. A particularly revealing record from this period is a transcript of an interview done with Margaret by Dr. James Harrington, no relation to the previous owners, on September 3, 1908. In this record, Margaret recounts her experiences. "They haven't left, you know. That's what Thomas refuses to accept. The well doesn't truly destroy them, it reshapes them. They become part of it, but they never vanish. I hear them at night calling through the walls. At first, it was only noises, scraping and tapping, then words, my name, again and again. Now they speak in full sentences. They know things they shouldn't know, private conversations, thoughts I never revealed. They're evolving, growing stronger. The more it consumes, the more aware it becomes. Thomas fed it so many during the storm. The children were the worst. Their voices are sharpest now. They follow us. Denver isn't far enough. Nothing ever would be. The interview goes on with Margaret detailing what she called visitations. Sometimes I see them, not just hear them. They rise from drains, seep through cracks in the floorboards. They lack any true form, only hints of what they were. A hand there, a face here, merging and splitting like shapes in smoke. But they're becoming more solid. Last night, one touched me. A cold, wet contact on my arm, leaving no mark, yet feeling as real as your hand would. It had a child's fingers, tiny and searching. They're learning to reach beyond, to extend past the pipes and chambers that confined them. Distance means nothing to them now. They've found us, and they're ravenous. The investigation stalled through the rest of 1964, hindered by the case's age and lack of physical evidence. In December, funding shifted toward active cases, and the location was again sealed and left. The Historical Society, uneasy about liability and disturbed by the findings, transferred the property to the county for a token payment in March 1965. In 1968, the site was bought by developer Conrad Westfield, planning to tear down the ruins and build a modern motel catering to the expanding Ozarks tourism. During demolition in February 1968, workers broke open the sealed primary shaft. According to the foreman's report filed with county officials but never released publicly, one worker was lowered into the shaft to assess structural stability before full removal. That worker, Joseph Keene, 34, descended about 40 feet before radio contact cut off. When hauled back up 7 minutes later, Keene was in severe distress, unable to explain what he saw. He was taken to Regional Medical Center for shock and hallucinations. Medical charts note he repeated that it's still alive down there and the well isn't empty. When questioned, he described movement in the darkness and something that spoke without a mouth. His file notes he tried plugging his ears with pillow cotton, telling a nurse it knows my name now. It's calling me. A more complete account comes from Dr. Michael Reynolds, the attending physician whose private notes later went to investigators. Patient shows symptoms matching extreme psychological trauma. Physical checks reveal no wounds beyond minor scrapes matching a rapid climb in a confined space. Most disturbing is the patient's insistence something inside the well shaft communicated directly not through sound but through what he called thoughts that weren't mine forcing into my head. He said he received precise details about his past that he'd never told anyone at the site, including an event from his childhood in Ohio. He also claims visions in the shaft, shapes born of darkness moving against it and faces forming then dissolving in something like thick water. When asked if these were hallucinations from oxygen loss, patient became enraged, saying, "It touched me. It knows me now. It won't forget." Keene checked himself out against medical advice on February 17, 1968. He left Newton County that same day and, according to a short follow-up inquiry, moved to Oregon. He refused every request for statements about his experience in the shaft. A single letter from Keene to the sheriff dated March 3, 1968 says only, "Whatever is down there must stay buried. Fill it with concrete, fill it with stone, then pray it's enough." Westfield soon abandoned the project, citing unforeseen environmental issues. The property returned to county ownership for a token amount and was marked unsuitable for development. County records show that in March 1968, about 30 cubic yards of concrete were poured into the shafts. A note in the order states the mix included extra materials at the county engineer's request, later identified as rock salt, quicklime, and water specially blessed by a local Baptist pastor. Today, nearly 100 years after the Holloway Hotel events, the site is still untouched. Local laws forbid digging deeper than 6 feet in that zone. A small marker placed by the Historical Society in 1969 merely labels the location as the former hotel site, without reference to its sinister past. Blackwater Creek still runs nearby, and during heavy rain, the old foundation stones sometimes emerge when soil erodes. What remains unanswered, and likely always will, is the true nature of what Thomas Holloway called the well. His journal implies he discovered something beneath the hotel, something that could erase bodies so completely no trace survived. The forensic tests from 1964 verified the existence of strange chemical substance, but failed to determine their source. The devices he constructed to send victims to that entity or substance worked with cold precision, allowing him to kill for profit without being caught. Some researchers have speculated that Holloway might have stumbled upon a natural geological structure, possibly a sinkhole containing a rare mix of microorganisms and minerals that sped up decomposition. Professor James Thornan, a geologist who briefly surveyed the site in 1966, theorized that certain limestone layers in the Ozarks harbor strange bacterial colonies capable of breaking down organic matter at unusual speeds. These colonies typically emerge in sealed underground ecosystems with distinctive chemical compositions. What Holloway referred to as the well could have been such a formation, though his accounts hint at traits beyond anything documented in existing scientific texts. Others offer more ordinary explanations, claiming Holloway simply used potent acids or other agents to destroy his victims, and the journal's cryptic phrases were efforts to mask his methods or illusions born of guilt-driven delusion. Dr. Catherine Mills, a forensic psychologist who examined the case in 1972, argued that Holloway's writings show classic signs of psychological distancing and mystification often seen in serial killers who create elaborate narratives to justify their crimes. The repeated references to the well as a sentient force may symbolize an externalization of his murderous drive, allowing him to see himself as merely feeding the well's hunger instead of acting on his own will. What these interpretations cannot account for are the sounds reported by several witnesses, the scratching from below, and eventually, if Mary Ellis and Margaret Holloway spoke truth, something that sounded like words. They also do not explain Joseph Keene's violent reaction to whatever he faced in the well shaft in 1968, long after the last body would have vanished into its depths. Perhaps most unsettling is a note within the final pages of Mitchell's inquiry, filed separately and restricted to senior staff. A recorder lowered into the tertiary shaft in July 1964 captured nearly 8 minutes of audio before failing. Analysis revealed only ambient noises for 7 minutes, water dripping, soil shifting, the distant thunder of groundwater. In the last minute, however, technicians isolated a sound described as rhythmic scraping, mixed with vocal-like elements resembling structured speech, though no phrases were definitively clear. The tape was scheduled for advanced testing at a federal lab in September 1964, but shipping logs show it never reached its destination. All copies were reportedly lost in a small blaze at the evidence storage site in October 1964. Detective Mitchell requested reopening the file in 1965 but was denied. He retired early the following year and moved to Arizona, where he passed away in 1972. His personal papers, donated by his daughter to the state archives, include one remark about the Holloway case. Some investigations are best left unresolved. Some answers would only swap mystery for madness. A diary entry from Mitchell dated August 17, 1964, but absent from official documents, reads, "The techs finally cleaned up that audio from the shaft, stripped away background noise, boosted the vocal tones. I wish they hadn't. What we're hearing isn't random, it's voices, several voices speaking in unison, with individual ones rising briefly before sinking back into the group. The words are English, though warped as if spoken underwater. The phrases repeat, feed us, join us, find us. The last part is worst, a child's voice breaking from the others, pleading what sounds like, 'Mummy, I'm still here, we're all still here.' I ordered every copy destroyed. Some things should never endure, not even as proof." The Holloway Hotel has faded from public memory. The land is now a nondescript wooded lot in sea, loosed by chain-link fencing. Few locals know the tale and fewer still believe it, but now and then, usually after heavy rain when the water table rises, hikers near the old foundation report strange noises, a churning liquid, a metallic scrape, and sometimes, barely audible, what could be words. A park ranger interviewed in 1966 recalled his encounter. "I was checking boundary markers after the spring floods and wandered near the old hotel site. It was getting dark, but I know these woods. Then I heard it. Like metal dragging across stone, but with a rhythm. Then something else, like whispers, but not quite. Not English, but nothing like any foreign language I know either. It made the hair on my neck stand straight. I've roamed these woods my whole life and never felt fear like that. I left at once and haven't gone near at dusk since." The ranger's statement adds details missing from official files. The strangest part wasn't the sound, but how it hit me physically. As I listened, it felt like something tugging inside me, pulling me toward the ruins. My thoughts blurred, replaced with images I'd never seen. A hotel room with a bed by the wall, a dining hall filled with unknown faces, a man with a mustache working some contraption beneath a desk. These weren't like memories. They forced their way in, sharp and vivid. I started walking toward the foundation without deciding to. I'd gone nearly 30 yards before I realized, and made myself turn back. When I did, the pictures faded, leaving one thought that wasn't mine. We are so hungry. The last recorded event occurred in August 1967, when 2 geology students from the University of Arkansas were running soil tests nearby. Their field recordings, preserved in university archives yet rarely reviewed, held 2 minutes of what they labeled unidentified subterranean acoustics. Beneath their technical chatter, something swelled from T-Tsuos. Earth, a sound that might have been water or wind or stone shifting, but when digitally enhanced revealed an undeniable cadence of speech, phonetic. Review by linguistics expert Dr. Robert Chambers detected recurring patterns aligned with speech, though matching no documented human dialect. His account, never released yet stored in the university's restricted archive, states, "The vocalizations reveal syntactic order and FMIC stability indicative of linguistic expression, but utilize sound patterns physically unachievable by the human vocal system." One student, Martin Coleman, later shared added context in a letter sent to the Historical Society. "What the audio emits is the visual manifestation we observed. While performing our survey near the old foundation, we noticed a strange staining in the ground, a darkness spreading outward from the foundation stones like ink bleeding through fabric. The discoloration moved uphill against the slope, which is scientifically impossible for normal fluid mechanics. As it neared our instruments, we detected a localized temperature decrease of about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Most disturbing was how insects behaved within the tainted soil. They appeared to align into shapes resembling alphabetic symbols, forming and reforming in sequences that almost, but not quite, created legible words. When we tried photographing this occurrence, all 3 cameras failed simultaneously. The staining receded as suddenly as it emerged when another hiker approached from the path, shouting a greeting. We chose not to report these observations in our official findings, as they resisted scientific interpretation and likely would have discredited our geological work. What speaks beneath the remnants of the Holloway Hotel? What lingers in the shadows of a well that devours human lives? Maybe it is only the breeze whispering through hidden hollows, or water coursing through Holloway's forgotten pipes. Maybe it's nothing more than imagination shaping echoes of old horrors. Or maybe, as Thomas Holloway learned to his ultis, Mate Dread, what he uncovered beneath his hotel was never just a disposal pit. Maybe the thing he called the well had accepted his tributes for its own intent. Maybe it still waits, patient and ravenous, under the sealed slabs and fallen beams of a hotel long reduced to stonework and fading memory. The case files still sit in the Newton County archives, reachable only by special clearance, yet seldom consulted. The land remains untouched, guarded by ordinances whose original motive few recall. And deep below, something might still be digesting its last feast. A feast of 27 souls delivered by a desperate innkeeper who learned too late that some appetites, once satisfied, only swell larger. In the years since, numerous efforts to build there have collapsed for various reasons: financial snags, permit rejections, unforeseen mechanical failures. Local folks speak of bad fortune clinging to the property without knowing why. Only a handful of elderly residents recall the tales their grandparents told of the Holloway Hotel and the travelers who checked in but never left. The report ends with a caution against future construction, citing unstable subterranean conditions of uncertain origin. The geologist who authored it later declined to elaborate when contacted by local historians, remarking only that some places in this world are best abandoned. An appendix to the report, absent from public documents but uncovered during the Historical Society's review, contains this passage. Soil samples from the site exhibit anomalies inconsistent with nearby geology. The final official record on the property is a geological survey from 1969, noting strange subsidence patterns near the former foundation. Most alarming is an unidentified organic substance that seems to alter the strength of surrounding materials. In lab tests, this substance demonstrated the ability to infiltrate seemingly impede, permeable matter, including concrete and certain metals. Most concerning is its apparent reaction to living tissue. When a fragment was placed beside a lab mouse, the substance turned toward the creature and displayed heightened molecular activity. The ramifications of these traits for containment are unsettling. Ordinary barriers might fail if the compound retains such behaviors over time. Today, Blackwater Creek still winds past the tangled lot where the Holloway Hotel once rose. Trees have reclaimed the land, their roots prying apart the remaining stonework. Yet nothing grows directly over the spots where the well shafts were sealed. 3 barren circles amid thriving greenery, as though the earth itself rejects what festers below. And sometimes, if you linger at the edge of the site on a silent night when the wind is still and the creek runs low, you might hear it. A murmur from far beneath, no longer quite scratching, no longer quite whispering, something in between, something watching, something that recalls the flavor of those who once fed it and craves more still. The latest account comes from a hiker who strayed from the main path in June 1968, describing a flawless circle of dead growth about 15 feet across, centered on what looked like an old foundation block. In the middle sat a shallow pool of something resembling water, yet moving wrong, too thick, too deliberate in its flow. As I stared, it shaped lines almost like script. I stepped closer for clarity, and that's when I heard the voices, not aloud, but inside my mind. They spoke my name. They knew things no stranger could know. They promised to reveal something wondrous. If I would only move nearer, just touch the surface of that pool. I was lifting my hand when my dog erupted in frantic barking, shattering whatever trance had gripped me. As I turned to leave, I felt something like fingers skim the back of my neck, cold, damp, but horribly solid. I sprinted back to the main road. My dog refused to follow me home, bolted into the forest, and never returned. Sometimes I think she sensed something I didn't, something about what might have come back with me if she hadn't intervened. The lot remains unbuilt even now, a silent monument to terrors largely erased from memory. The well keeps its patient watch beneath the ground, reaching out now and then to remind the living it still exists. And Thomas Holloway's frantic gamble to salvage his fortune endures as a grim warning. Some deals demand costs beyond measure, and some hungers, once stirred, can never truly be appeased.